Welcome, everybody. We are so excited about this call today. Welcome to the Red to Bold call with the Progressive Change Campaign Committee and wonderful candidates and wonderful incumbents and wonderful soon-to-be members of Congress. This event feels very special today. This is not your typical Zoom call. There won't be any stump speeches. This is just genuine engagement and hopefully some extra bonding between some of the most important progressive political leaders in America. And if this call has one theme, it's power, and that is progressive power. We're going to talk about how it plays on the campaign trail, how it's an asset during Get Out the Vote, and how together we will build more power when these great leaders serve together in the next Congress. So today we're joined by John Hoadley in Michigan, Pam Keith in Florida, Candace Valenzuela, Mike Siegel, and Julie Oliver in Texas, Cara Eastman in Nebraska's 2nd District, which has its own electoral college vote, and Dana Balter in rural upstate New York. And when these candidates flip red districts, not just blue, but bold, our progressive agenda will have more power in Congress. Members and incoming members of Congress like Jamaal Bowman, Katie Porter, and Jamie Raskin, who are also joining us today, they will have more power when progressives flip red districts. The more progressives we elect in the House, the bolder our agenda can be during a Biden administration on the existential issues that we have to tackle, from the coronavirus to climate change. And as these leaders can share, bold progressive ideas are often the best way to reach across the aisle and build big voting coalitions that take on corporate interests. Many of our fights are not about left versus right, but about top versus bottom, corporate greed versus working families. Since announcing this Red to Bold slate with Katie Porter last week, members of the Progressive Change Campaign Committee have already chipped in over $90,000 to this slate. And on redtobold.com, we are inching closer to our first big goal of 100,000, and we hope we get even closer on this call. So please chip in at redtobold.com if you can. So today we're thrilled to be joined for this conversation by Katie Porter, our biggest red to blue champion from 2018. We were proud to support Katie in her primary. And at the time, her primary opponent said she could never win the general election as a progressive. Guess what? She did. We're also joined by Congressman Jamie Raskin and future Congressman Jamaal Bowman, both of whom we were so proud to support in their primaries. So to start, my co-founder Adam Green will engage in about 5 minutes of conversation with Katie, Jamaal, and Jamie, and then invite our other candidates to participate. Senator Warren will join the conversation for about 20 minutes, and then we'll all continue talking about progressive power on the campaign trail and in Congress until 3 p.m. I will note that we have a bell, Adam has a bell, and if you hear it, that means we kindly request that you finish up in about 10 seconds so others can speak. But hopefully everyone can just naturally keep your comments succinct so we can really keep this conversation flowing. So with that, let me turn to Adam Green, my co-founder.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to the candidates. Thanks to so many PCCC members. Thanks to some reporters who are on the phone as well. I would note that, there's so much going on in the world right now. There's a presidential race, Senate races, Supreme Court, COVID, but it's very important that we take this time to talk about building power in the House and what that will do for the entire agenda. It's also worth noting that in order for Joe Biden to win, he will need to get out the vote in many of the states that the candidates on this call are running in: Michigan, Florida, Nebraska's 2nd District, as Stephanie mentioned, Texas, and Dana Balter putting points on the board in upstate rural New York. So, every dollar that we contribute to these candidates to help them get out every single vote is also helping us to defeat Donald Trump. So again, as Stephanie said, we're gonna keep this very casual, and we're gonna start off by just talking with Katie. And Katie, let me ask you a pretty simple question. Curious, how would your life and how would progressives influencing Congress be different if a bunch of people on this call flipped red districts from red to bold and blue? And as Congress takes on big issues like coronavirus relief, climate, corporate accountability, do you think what's possible in those debates will be bigger? Will the ceiling be raised on what's possible if the entire political world knew that a bunch of bold progressives flipped red districts like you did. Any thoughts on that?
Thank you so much, Adam and Stephanie, for your inspiring words. Absolutely, having red to bold candidates would change the energy and the conversation in the House of Representatives. And with so much focus this cycle, understandably, on the presidential and on the Senate, I'm so grateful to PCCC for bringing together this terrific slate of candidates and focusing on how we continue to improve the quality and energy and progressive focus of the House of Representatives. It's really, really important. I am one of the few people in the entire House of Representatives who both goes to frontliner meetings talking about how we hold tough seats and is on the board of the Congressional Progressive Caucus on the executive board. So I have been able to be a bridge, help communicate, help bring together people who, while they may disagree on some issues, share a commitment to restoring Americans' confidence in government, share a commitment to standing up to corporate power, to refusing corporate PAC money, to fighting for equal rights. And so it's really, really important that we show that a winning message is a message about fighting for the people. And that's what every single one of these candidates is doing. These are people who have taken on real progressive positions, have shown great respect to their voters, told them what they believe, what they're going to fight for, and they're going to win because they've shown that kind of honesty and political courage. And we need more folks like that in the House. It will absolutely change what we're able to accomplish, how far we are able to go when we're tackling issues where there are powerful corporate interests on the other side, like prescription drug pricing.
Amazing. Thanks, Katie. Again, we want to build you a crew of fellow red to blue people. And Jamaal, I'm curious, as someone who's about to go to Congress, you're probably thinking about your staffing, probably thinking about your legislative priorities. As you think about the landscape ahead for you, how would your life be different if a bunch of people who just flipped red districts on issues that you campaigned on were in there with you?
Yeah, so right now I'm sitting outside the school that I founded 11 years ago. It's a middle school in the Northeast Bronx. And I just think about my kids and their lives and how different their lives would be, the lives of their families would be. I mean, Medicare for all would be a reality if we're able to bring more bold progressives to Congress. A Green New Deal would be a reality. That would be something that would get done. A federal jobs guarantee, humane criminal justice reform, humane immigration reform. These are the things that will be on the table if we have more progressives in Congress. And you talked about a ceiling. There will no longer be a ceiling. The sky would literally be the limit in terms of what we could get accomplished for my former students and communities that have been disenfranchised across this country. So I'm excited about getting it done. I'm excited about being a part of that.
Awesome. So excited to be working with you when you're in Congress. And Jamie Raskin is here also, who, like Katie, is a very effective inside player, works a lot with leadership and also works a lot with the Progressive Caucus. Jamie, curious if you have any thoughts on what Jamaal and Katie just said in terms of how influence for progressives would be different if a bunch of folks on this call flipped red districts to bold and blue.
Well, thank you, Adam, and thanks to Stephanie too. How my life would change is pretty easy to say because I'm on the leadership team in the House. I was elected by colleagues to be on the leadership team. And oftentimes we hear we can't do, you fill in the blank. It might be a $15 minimum wage. It might be strong antitrust legislation, whatever it might be, because of Democrats who are in the most vulnerable swing districts. But then we've got Katie Porter and Mike Levin. And if we put in a dozen more of those people, we'll say, on the contrary, it's precisely because of those people that we've got to act forcefully so they can keep their promises, because they didn't get elected by being mealy-mouthed, milquetoast, carpers and connivers. They got elected by going out and advocating for a bold progressive program. So let's pass it so we can help them in addition to everybody else in the country.
Got it. And Katie, I see you nodding your head. Anything to add to that?
No, he's absolutely right. I mean, one of my most powerful memories of my first term in Congress is the wonderful Elijah Cummings calling me up. And I was so excited, and I picked up the phone, and he said, you know, I just keep hearing that we can't pursue impeachment, for example, because of people like you. And is that true? And I said, absolutely not, sir. I got elected by fighting to do what's right, by promising to stand up for our country's values, and therefore I support impeaching the president. And so Jamie's absolutely right that there's a lot of efforts to divide our Democratic caucus rather than bring our caucus together. And having more red to bold candidates is really, really key to bridging, I think, sometimes what are not actual divides, because we all want to help the American people, but actually are things that are divisions created by corporate power to try to slow down the progress of change.
Really well put. And I'd love to just bring in some of the candidates here while we await Senator Warren joining us. I think what we're hearing is that there's kind of a broken conventional wisdom in some circles of Washington, D.C. that says that only people in very blue districts can be bold and progressive, campaign on their values. Katie Porter obviously shows that's not true. Would love to hear one or two anecdotes from some of the candidates based on your experience on the campaign trail. Have you noticed an uptick in energy and excitement, including from swing voters and including volunteer recruitment, when you offered bold ideas instead of small bore ideas? Would anyone care to share an anecdote about that?
I can jump in, Adam, if that's okay.
Sure.
So yeah, for me in my district, the Texas 10th, which is in the heart of Texas here, connects Austin to Houston. I think the bold move I did was to run on a Green New Deal, even though the district includes part of the oil patch and includes, this massive fossil fuel lobby in Texas. But what I found was that when we had these conversations, not just with progressives in Austin, but with landowners in the rural counties who are dealing with coal ash pollution and fracking, and then the Houston community, which has dealt with 500-year flood events in 5 years. People appreciated the courage it took to talk about climate change and fossil fuel emissions, even though I'm in Texas. And that helped me win the support of folks like the Sunrise Movement. They've made hundreds of thousands of phone calls for this campaign. And it was only by advocating for these progressive solutions that actually meet the scale of the crises we're facing that I was able to build this coalition. So, if and when I win on November 3, it's going to be because of these progressive positions, not in spite of.
Yeah,
Nice.
I find that the number one way to convert undecided voters is by talking about rejecting corporate PAC money. Hands down, it's the thing that resonates with people the most.
I found that in my district, there's a lot more tolerance for Medicare for all than for getting the Affordable Care Act. And so if it's a choice between someone who supports the Affordable Care Act and is moving towards Medicare for all and someone who's like, you're on your own, they choose me. And I think that that is a really exciting trend that we're seeing both from the left, the middle, and even some of the right.
Same thing in my district. And I'll just add, I'm currently a state legislator, and the number one thing that I hear is when people get angry that they're not seeing change, they want people out there advocating for the real solutions instead of playing it politically safe all the time. And so when you stand for something, people stand with you.
Wonderful. I see that Senator Warren has just joined us. Welcome, Senator Warren.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you. And I was just listening to what John said. John is right. I think about all these lines for people to vote. We really want people to line up to vote. We really want people to be engaged. Then the answer is give them something. Get in there and fight for something, because I think that's how it works. So I'm glad to be here with all of you today, and glad to take questions, whatever you all want to do. Adam, can I just say before we get started, and maybe people have already said this, but I really want to say a word about how the Progressive Campaign Change Committee has really just been on the front lines in this fight for such a long time to get progressive power and to get progressive visionaries like John, people who are going to fight for progressive values in office. And when they come in, they do fight, and it makes a difference. I was a long shot candidate. But I was bold and progressive, and PCCC is what helped get me across the line. Katie was a long shot candidate, and PCCC helped get her across the line. They've helped lots of candidates. And we're here today because we understand both this moment of crisis with COVID, with hundreds of people dying every day, with the economic crisis that's right on the heels of the medical crisis, and with the fact that it is finally time for a racial reckoning, that people can no longer deny injustice and racial inequality in this country. And I just came from the Senate floor. The Republicans are obviously actively working to steal a Supreme Court seat. So we've got all this going on, and it seems to me this is the moment when we need leaders in office who care about working families and who will stop at nothing to protect them. So I see this as a moment of great intensity, but also a moment of great opportunity, that a lot of people are fired up. They're looking for that leadership, and that's what we need. And for me, that's what PCCC is all about. And that's what being here today is all about being in the fight all the way to make structural change, real change. And that means we got to take back the White House. We've got to flip the Senate, and we've got to strengthen the number of seats in the House that aren't just held by Democrats. I'm all for that, but that are held by progressives. So it's what I love about today. It's not just flip red to blue, it's flip red to bold. We need a progressive force in the House, and the candidates who are on this call today could make all the difference. So why don't I stop there, Adam? Whatever you all want to talk about, I'm delighted to do it.
Thank you. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. And you're so right. We're building power together. We've been in the trenches together for a long time.
Yeah.
I would note that in addition to the 200 or so people on the Zoom, it looks like we have about 2,000 people watching us live on Facebook. And thank you again to the folks who have chipped in over $92,000 now to this slate of Red to Bold candidates. We're approaching the 100,000 number. So redtobold.com. Senator Warren, I'll ask you one question before Stephanie, pivoting to Stephanie. And it's something we were just talking about. You know, you've been in so many of these fights, and you know, you've seen what happens when progressives are told, no, we need to keep the ceiling low. How would the conventional wisdom change? How would your job as a progressive in Congress change if everybody in the political world knew that a bunch of the red to bold candidates on this call flipped red districts all across the country in places like Michigan and Florida, Texas, Nebraska? How would progressive power change in Congress and the ceiling on these issues?
So you pick the right metaphor, Adam. It changes where the ceiling is. You know, instead, what it would show is that progressives and progressive ideas are not only the real energy of our party, they also have real electoral impact. When we get progressives, we get people who can win. And the importance of that is to say to all my friends who are not as progressive, look, these are the ideas that the American people care about. When we talk about canceling student loan debt, we're not just talking to other progressives, we're talking to people all across this country and from a lot of different political persuasions. When we talk about expanding Social Security payments, we're not just talking to a handful of progressives, we're talking to all the progressives, and we're talking to all the Democrats, and we're actually pulling in a lot of the independents and Republicans. So I think of it as we just need a bigger group in Congress to be able to fight for these issues and to be able to sustain them over time. I'm just convinced we have such an opportunity in 2020, the kind of opportunity that doesn't come your way very often. With Donald Trump in the White House, so many people determined to get out there and vote and to get rid of him and the Republicans who've enabled him. This is our chance to say it's not only get rid of the bad, it's vote your vision, vote your values, vote your heart. That's how we're going to get the progressives in, and that's how we're going to make real change.
Wonderful. Stephanie, I think you're leading the next part.
Oh, great. Thank you, Senator Warren. So I have another question for you, which is, You have tons of experience organizing across the aisle, but on behalf of progressive priorities. You've worked with Republicans to pass bipartisan hearing aid legislation that made hearing aids more affordable for millions. You worked with Joe Manchin, West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, to push for expanded Social Security benefits. What is your advice to these future members of Congress on how to work across the aisle and across the caucus in the right way?
So I think it's pick your issue, pick the thing you want to get out there and fight for, make it concrete, make it real, and just start reaching out. And look, it will not be the end of the world if somebody tells you no. The things I've worked on, I've gotten some no's, but you just keep staying after it until you find somebody who says, yeah, I care about that too, and then build from there. But that's the thing. Bold ideas are not harder to get allies on than weak ideas, than bland ideas. Bold ideas that can make a real difference in people's lives. Look, as a progressive, A, I want to see them get done, but B, they're easy to run on because I can get out and talk to people about what I've done. I got to tell you, there are a lot of folks in Congress who look at that and think, maybe I could use that as well. Maybe I could be part of that as well. Student loan debt. Why do you think Mitch McConnell never brings it to a vote? It's because he's got so many folks on the Republican side who, if the vote were in front of them, would be over with us because they recognize they don't want to go home to their voters and have to say, yeah, there was this chance to cancel student loan debt for a bazillion people, but you know, that's just not part of Republican orthodoxy. Same thing about Social Security expansion. Why will Mitch do anything to block that from getting to the floor? Because it's popular. And that's what we have to remember. These progressive ideas that we talk about, protecting Roe versus Wade, 3 out of 4 Americans want to see Roe versus Wade stay the law. Great. Then let's just make the law through legislation. Let's not count on the Supreme Court. We understand that they're trying to get Amy Coney Barrett in there in part so she can overturn it. Fine, we can do it. It's not fine, but we can do it by legislation. So that's really my point. The things you want to fight for, the things you believe in, don't think of them just along this entirely political, oh, they only are the left and then maybe a little toward the middle. No, they're things that people like. And when they're things that people like, you can pick up allies from all kinds of places.
Great, thank you. And on that note, let's bring in some of our candidates, our Red to Bold candidates. And remember, you can donate to all of these candidates at redtobold.com. So let's just get started. Maybe we could get started with a few of our candidates from Texas, like Candace Valenzuela or Julie Oliver. And then I would invite all of our candidates to jump in. You know, when you think about the day that you walk into Congress as a new member, given your life experience, given your experience talking to voters as a candidate, what's the one thing that you can't wait to get done? And I would also invite you, if you have a burning yet short question for Senator Warren about how to engage effectively on that issue, please feel free to pose it and we'll just try and have a conversation here.
Oh, I am over the moon about the idea of campaign finance reform. So over the moon. So how do I talk to Joe voter about publicly financed elections?
Oh, I love this, Candace, and I'm so glad you do, because let's face it, money is at the heart of the corruption in Washington. Now, I'll tell you how I talk about it, but there may be others who have better ways. The way I always talk about this is, who do you want Congress to work for? Who do you want your elected representatives to work for? If you want them working for the billionaires, if you want them working for the giant corporations, if you want them working for a little tiny slice of folks at the top, then don't make any changes, because that's how it works right now. But if you want them working for all of us, then we got to dive in on campaign finance reform. And can I add on that, Candace? you don't have to just keep it within campaign finance reform, because what you're really talking about is corruption. You could pick up some other things that people find interesting along these lines too, like limitations on lobbying or limitations on people in Congress becoming lobbyists when they leave. There are a lot of different pieces. And here's the good news. HR 1 that got introduced this year, this is a big part of what I ran for president on. HR 1 has a whole lot of this anti-corruption pieces in it. So hang on to a couple of them, talk to the voters about them, and boy, you may be part of the very first bill that comes out of the House of Representatives. I don't know that that'll be HR 1 in 2021, but I'm sure hoping it's either going to be 1, 2, or 3 right in there.
Thank you so much, Senator Warren.
I got into the race originally because of healthcare. So healthcare is something I want to tackle. It's where I spent my career, and also was a Medicaid mom many, many years ago. So it's near and dear to my heart, but I agree with Candace. Campaign finance reform, I think, is one of the most important issues. If we have all of these bold ideas, we know that the challenge is money influencing the behaviors of those who are elected. And so one of the things that I've proposed, Candace, and maybe you and I can work on this together, I would love that, is revoking the tax exempt status of corporate PACs. Let's tax them. Let's tax them Let's tax them at like 90% and create a revenue stream.
Bold.
Yeah, let's create a revenue stream for the publicly financed campaigns.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of the things I want to work on too. That would be love to work on that with you, both Senator Warren and Candace.
So
anybody else too.
Let me say on this, Julie, what I love about what you said is it's not only a bold idea, but it's also working with each other. We're not just one-offs in Congress. Adam was asking me earlier, what difference would it make if we had more bold progressives in Congress? And the answer is we work together, and that strengthens all of us. You make me stronger, I make you stronger. That's the idea behind it. I hope in this last 13 days when you're out there talking about it, Julie, I hope you'll mention Candace and I are hoping to work together on getting this done. It makes it more real to people, and it makes people see you're actually thinking not just about a bumper sticker about how some pie in the sky something ought to be changed, but how you're going to work and actually make it happen, have some accountability behind it. I love it.
If I can just round out the Texas slate here, and we have to give a shout out to Congresswoman Porter with her whiteboard, stealing the show as usual. But Senator Warren, thank you so much for all of your amazing support. I mean, I think one of my concerns is that, knock on wood, we take the White House, we take the Senate, have a new majority leader, strengthen our delegation in the House. And then there's so much to do, right? And we can't dilly-dally. And it's this combination of like, okay, do we protect voting rights? Do we attack corruption? Expand healthcare? And a big issue in Texas is jobs, right? I mean, even in the fossil fuel sector, we've lost 50,000 oil and gas jobs, and the Republicans, for all their love of big oil, they haven't done anything to help those workers. And I'm just wondering, how are we going to sequence all these different things we need to tackle, whether it's jobs, healthcare, corruption, voting rights, and the rest, what's the flow of action that you would think we need next year?
So it's a great question, Mike. And here's how I think about this. I think of it as nothing succeeds like success. So if we can come in and in the first handful of days, couple of weeks, actually get something done, if we can hit the ground and do things that are felt in people's lives, tangible changes in people's lives, all of a sudden, I think how it's going to feel is we can get this done. And we're not going to feel like we're only going to be able to lift one thing. We'll feel like, wait a minute, we know how to succeed. So your first priority may come first and mine may come third, and something else that Candace is working on may come fifth. But the point is, if we feel like we're actually creating movement and succeeding, I think that's going to make it much easier for all of us, all the progressives, but really all of the Democrats and even a handful of Republicans, to say, I'll be part of this. My fight is your fight is my fight. So I see this as, let's pick 1, 2, 3 that are easy, the public understands them, and we can get them done fast. We get on the scoreboard, it gets a lot easier to score again and again and again. And every time you score, it gets easier to score the next time. And I think that's how we're going to make change, and that's how we're going to put these in order. One other thing I want to say in connection with that, it's what we'll do legislatively, but keep in mind, we're partway there already. I mentioned earlier I can't remember if I said it to Candace or to Julie, but I mentioned HR 1. A lot of the things that I've worked on as a progressive, there was zero chance that Mitch McConnell was going to let us do even a hearing on them in the Senate. I partnered up with my friends over in the House, and so the House has already had hearings. They've already drafted the legislative language. They've already introduced the bills, and in some cases have already passed the bills. That means we've got momentum already. And so those are going to be very likely places for us to start. And again, to show we can get on the scoreboard. We take back the Senate, then it becomes much easier for us to pick up what the House is doing fast, move it over to the Senate, and get it to the president's desk. One other thing I'll mention quickly, legislative, you bet, that's what we're going to fight for, because that's our tool, our principal tool, but it's not our only tool. Remember, there's a lot these agencies can do by themselves, like canceling a big chunk of student loan debt. So encouraging, I hope, President Biden and Vice President Harris, encouraging our friends in the administration to have bold leaders in charge of these agencies and in charge of these departments, and to pick up the tools and use them. It's fast, and we can make real change. So we want to think of it as working together and understand this. Every time you stand up and give a speech on the issue that matters to you, every time you push on the jobs issue, you make it easier not only to do things in the House, but also in the Senate and also in the administration. That's how we build real energy, and that's how we're going to make change and do it together. I hope that makes sense to you. Does it?
Yes, certainly. Thank you.
Good.
Head nods. I think Katie has to go in a second, but we did get a comment on Twitter when Elizabeth Warren talked about this event. Someone responded, "Will Katie Porter's whiteboard be attending?" So Katie.
Absolutely.
Katie,
Without question.
Katie,
Right there, redtobold.com. So make sure that you're stepping up and contributing to these candidates. I really just have to echo, I really stand before you as an example of what it means to have a partnership. A partnership with my amazing professor, now Senator Elizabeth Warren, a partnership with PCCC. These are partnerships that don't just help get people elected, they help people lead in bold ways. These are friendships and connections and grassroots support that really change the nature of how we govern. So thank you so much to everybody who supported redtobold.com. Please give what you can, please volunteer if you can for these terrific candidates.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie, including for holding up the redtobold.com website. One programming note, looks like we're over 94,000 now, and Craig Hicks Frazier from Washington says if we get over 95,000, he'll get us across the 100,000 line. So I would encourage folks right now to chip in if you can. Senator Warren, before you go, one final question for you. I've seen you on the campaign trail in New Hampshire and Wisconsin, Minnesota for Joe Biden. Heard you made the point that we're now it's a turnout game, right? We get out every vote. And I'm curious if you can just connect the dots for us between kind of progressive energy and turnout. Are there any anecdotes from your campaigns in the past or what you're seeing on the Biden campaign trail where talking about Joe Biden's Build Back Better plan or progressive themes in general are resulting in higher energy among volunteers or in your mind, more voters being energized to turn out and vote?
So absolutely, Adam. There is no doubt about it. What people stand up and cheer for are progressive ideas. Katie and I always laugh about what she and I often talk about, that nobody stands in line for a bowl of warm mush. They want to hear about the big changes we're going to make. And here's the pitch I was making just this past weekend in Wisconsin and in Minnesota. It was to say, look, we're in this fight right now. We're in this fight to win. We want to beat Donald Trump, not just by a little bit, but by a lot. We want to take back the Senate. We want to expand our lead in the House. But here's the thing. Having a big win on November 3rd is not only about pushing out the Republicans. The bigger the win, the more energy there is in every one of these things that we're talking about. Student loan debt, childcare, Social Security, campaign finance reform. There's more energy behind every one of them. So here was the pitch I made this weekend in Wisconsin and in Minnesota to all the different groups I met with. I said, when you think about, you've already voted. That was always the first question. Have you voted? And everybody had voted. And I always said, great. I could find one or two maybe who hadn't voted, and we would all identify that person, make sure they vote. Get all your friends to vote, get all your family to vote, get all your coworkers and people you go to school with to vote. Because the more we push those numbers up, the more energy is behind our progressive agenda. And I said, so if you volunteer an hour, think of it as volunteering an hour for Joe and Kamala, absolutely, and for your Senate candidate, for your House candidate, but also think of it as volunteering an hour for canceling student loan debt. Think of it as volunteering an hour for universal child care. Think of it as volunteering an hour for expanding Social Security payments or campaign finance reform. These core issues that we are determined as progressives to get done. The bigger the turnout, the bigger the margin of victory, the more energy we've got going into this, and the more progressives we get into the House, the more that we can push for big structural change.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, Senator Warren, and we hope that to help elect you more progressive allies in Congress.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, and Adam, hold on one sec. If Katie's going to bring her whiteboard, come here, Bailey. Bailey. Ooh, he's sleeping down here by my. Come on, Bailey.
Where's the treat? We need a treat.
Yeah, he needs a treat. He needs a treat. Come on, Bailey. Can't you at least say, can you see him there? Is he there?
Hey, Bailey.
Hey, Bailey. Are you, say red to blue, baby. Red to blue. Oh, he's ready. Red to blue. Red to bold. Let's make it happen, Adam. Take care. Thank you.
All right. I don't think we've heard from Dana Balter yet. Dana, curious, up in rural upstate New York, what is your top priority when you get to Congress? And do you have any thoughts to share based on what Elizabeth was just talking about in terms of the connection between progressive issues on the campaign trail and energy among voters and volunteers? Dana?
Yeah, my top priorities are campaign finance reform and healthcare, which people have already talked about, but broadly, the structural reforms that Senator Warren talks about, I think are the things that are the most important because they're the key to making progress on all of these other issues. And it's one of the reasons why I was so inspired by her presidential run, because not enough people talk about how important those structural reforms are and what a difference they make in our lives. One of the things that I think we have to push forward on is antitrust legislation. Because again, that affects every area of policy. I'm in a rural district. I'm looking forward to working with other members representing rural districts to fight for good agriculture policy for small and medium-sized farmers who are going under, they're operating on razor thin margins and going under at extraordinary rates because our policy is designed for giant agribusiness instead of for everyday folks who've been farming for 200 years and trying to pass something on to the next generation. So it's one more example of a policy area where those structural reforms will make a big, big difference.
Got it. All right. We have some themes here. Healthcare, cleaning up the corruption, cleaning up big money in politics. We have about 18 minutes left, and all of you are now in the end game. It's the final 2 weeks, all thinking about closing strong. If there's one person on this call who most recently closed strong, it is Jamaal Bowman, if he's still here. Jamaal, you still here? Let's see.
Yes, sir. I'm here. I haven't left yet.
Sorry. I mean, if anybody closed strong this year, it was you. I'm curious if you have any thoughts, logistically on what that looked like for you. I think that was in the beginning of the coronavirus period where a lot of people were making adjustments. And again, did you see a connection between bold progressive ideas and an uptick in volunteer energy and turnout? Any advice for the candidates?
Of course. So, I mean, we launched June 18th, 2019. The election was June 23rd, 2020. So we did a lot of work just building progressive power throughout the district prior to the pandemic. So when we pivoted to a virtual world, we already had some of those deep relationships that we needed to build. And I'm sure every candidate on this call probably did the same thing. But toward the end, the phone bank operation was just through the roof. I mean, overall, we made 1.2 million phone calls, and like 865,000 of those calls were made by the Sunrise Movement and people affiliated with Sunrise. So, we really tapped into the energy of young people throughout our campaign, and we had children and grandchildren telling their parents and grandparents that they better vote for Jamaal Bowman. Which was awesome. So the parents, once you see your children excited about anything, like you're going to do whatever they say. So that's what we saw, and that's what was powerful. And all of the progressive ideas that we've been talking about today, and for me as a former educator, universal child care, fully investing in our public schools, early childhood education, housing as a human right, food security. Those are the issues. And obviously, Green New Deal, Medicare for All, those are the issues that really move the needle. And talking about wealth inequality and racial inequality in a real way that just, demands that the wealthy pay their fair share into a system that invests back into our democracy. So the volunteer energy was strong in the streets, but phone banking was very influential for us toward the end. And it helped us to pull out a 16-point victory where we won not just the urban districts, but the suburban districts as well.
Was that a 16-point victory?
16-point victory, and we were up 25 points on election night. So even after the mail-in ballots were counted, we still maintained a 16-point victory over a 31-year incumbent. And to your point, and to what's been brought up today, the machine thought that they had enough power and leverage to pull this out, but we plugged into the people very early on. And I know everyone on this call has done the same thing. So as long as you got that, once you have that people power, you're unstoppable.
Well put. And Jamie Raskin, you had a similar situation a couple of years ago. You were in a uphill battle in a primary. We were proud to support you, Jamie. And I think you might've been outspent 12-1 or something like that. Do you have any thoughts, Jamie, on just kind of what does an end game look like? Logistically, energy-wise, as a progressive, Jamie Raskin?
Well, this is where the Progressive Change Campaign Committee's endorsement made so much of a difference for me, because although I was the only progressive in my 9-person race at the beginning, by the end, they were all saying they were progressive, and they were mimicking me and imitating me. And it was the most expensive primary, and remains the most expensive primary in US history. And one of my opponents was a billionaire who's now in Congress from a neighboring district, but he was spending 10-1 what we were spending to get this message out. But I had the Progressive Change Campaign Committee on my side. And so the PCCC does not fall for anybody who calls themselves a progressive, but is not involved in the movements, is not involved in the causes. And luckily I'd been in the state Senate for a decade, so I could say, I'd led the fight to abolish the death penalty and to decriminalize marijuana and for marriage equality and so on. But now is the time, I think, to pull out all of your progressive credentials and all of your progressive supporters from around the country. And I want to say, Adam, before we get off, I'm sending you $1,000 today to go to these great candidates. And I hope the other members too will contribute.
Wonderful. Well, I will say we're up to 97,000 now. So if somebody wants to get us across the 100,000 line, now is the time to do it. Let's hear some more anecdotes from the candidates. Again, all of you are thinking about the end game. Again, any questions for Congressman Raskin, or just any anecdotes to share about how you, especially in this coronavirus world, and as a progressive in a swing district, are thinking about the end game?
So I have been spending a little bit of time contacting undecided voters. that my team give me from their phone banking efforts. And we're having fascinating conversations. They're not always easy, but I do highly recommend that as a strategy. It's invigorating, and about 95% of the time I'm able to flip them. But I think it's kind of a fun way to spend your time right now.
I am floored by the uptick in Republicans who are proudly volunteering that they're Republicans and proudly volunteering that they're voting for me, that they're voting for Democrats all the way up and down the ballot, and that they're looking for policies that are actually going to have a positive effect on their lives. And, you know, there are plenty of anti-Trump votes, but there are a lot of folks who are voting for a better vision of this country. And that is one of the most wonderful things to hold on to in this year, when there are not a lot of bright spots in this process. This hunger for positive change, this hunger for bold progressivism to help people is great to see in Texas, of all places.
So I've been on the receiving end of the most homophobic attacks in the country right now. And I think about that because there's a lot of folks who then, it seems like it's inspired folks to actually get out and vote for me because they watch, you know, that their member of Congress does nothing to stand up or fight back against these attacks. But I guess, you know, for Congressman Raskin or other folks on the call, what do you think is the best closing pitch for people who are still cynical that their vote is going to make a difference? I mean, what's the best thing that you're seeing as moving voters?
I mean, it's a great question. I love the idea of just getting as many of them on the phone as possible because they're going to be blown away just that you call them, you listen to them, you give them your cell phone number. But in terms of more of a wholesale approach, I think what you got to say is we've got to remember that cynicism and pessimism are strategies, that the big powers that run Washington, the big money powers want everybody to be cynical and jaded and to turn off because then they can continue to run stuff. So optimism is an act of progressive hope and action and change. And you're asking them to take a chance on you. And here's your cell phone number. And you might not agree on every little detail, but your door's always open. You are always there to hear them.
All right. I think my co-founder Stephanie will guide us through the next leg of conversation. Steph?
Yes, well, I have a big announcement that someone just pinged me and told me we are now over $100,000 raised for our Red to Bold candidates on redtobold.com. So great job, everybody who's been giving throughout this call. Great job to the candidates for being so inspiring that we wanted to invest in you.
Fantastic.
Hey, Adam, Stephanie, I got to go, but I just wanted to say one more thing. I'm not positive this is true, but I've been told by somebody that it's my longtime campaign aide, Maddie Krakoff, who's been also working for the PCCC, who came up with the expression red to bold. So I just want to give her a shout out for doing that because I think that is going to sweep our electoral fortunes in 2020 and beyond.
That is true. Great
Thank
job.
you, Maddie.
Yes, big shout out to Madeline and everyone on our PCCC team who's been working so hard on this event on behalf of the candidates. Thank you, everybody. We have time for a few more anecdotes. Again, I think our members in particular would love to hear a little bit more about just what you're seeing on the campaign trail. You know, how kind of effective campaigning and progressive campaigning are emerging, and especially as you're in the end game, what are some tactics that you're trying and, you know, just things to put on the radar?
I think something that is really important running in a red to bold district is reminding people that the issues that we're running on, the things we're fighting for, are their issues. We hear this theme over and over again in progressive conversations, right? We are running against candidates who are trying to paint us as out of touch with the mainstream, but nothing could be further from the truth. 68% of Americans support a $15 minimum wage. 63% of Americans support universal health care. 77% of Americans support getting money out of politics. These aren't just majority positions, they're super majority positions. And we are running in districts that look like America. We have to, I think the most effective way to get voters out is to reframe the conversation, to remind them that our priorities are their priorities. And on the ground, we see the response to it. We see the excitement.
I have to echo what Dana just said. A lot of the issues that we are talking about are just issues that people face. And so I don't say they're progressive solutions. I just say it's a solution. You know, one of the things that I'm super proud of is my military service, but also my experience as a veteran. And I have a bold idea to move the Veterans Administration into the Department of Defense budget so that every time we are increasing troop levels, we are concomitantly increasing funding to the VA so that it is not subject to sequester and domestic discretionary spending cuts. Because if we're going to go to war, then we better be caring for our warriors. And in my district, that's not a left idea. That's not a right idea. That's just a smart idea. And I think that's what Dana is saying. And I couldn't support her more and echo what she's saying. People want to know that you understand their pain, their suffering, their struggle, their problem, and you're presenting a viable solution. At that point, they don't care whether you're progressive, liberal, or whatever. It's a solution, and that's what they're looking for.
I would say also one of the things that we've been doing in our campaign on phone banks, and you know, when I talk to people, I publish my phone number on our website. So if you scroll to the bottom of our website, it's there. If you call, you're going to get this cell phone right here. And I've had people who are actually shocked when I answer the phone. They're like, "Wait, are you Julie Oliver? Are you like answering Julie Oliver's office?" I'm like, "No, I'm Julie Oliver." So being accessible, I think demonstrating that as a candidate also demonstrates, I think, how you will be as a congresswoman or congressman. It demonstrates that you're here and available for the people that you are elected to serve. And I think that's a really powerful statement that we can all demonstrate right now in these final 2 weeks.
That is really cool. You know, we're going to be reporting back on this call to our members. In addition to the thousands of people watching online, we want to make sure that we invite people to keep watching. And you know, I would actually love to include any thoughts you have on, you know, what people who came before you, like Katie Porter, like Elizabeth Warren, you know, have meant to your leadership and thinking about what's possible. You know, do the fact that they have been so successful politically while keeping it real as a progressive, you know, impact how you think about politics in your campaigning?
For me personally, it has meant the world to see Rep. Porter, to see Senator Warren running as themselves, having a bold agenda that centers working families, a bold agenda that goes directly against corruption. Being able to watch them, particularly in the last couple of years, made me feel as though I could, in fact, run as myself and not lie about who I was or have to do a bunch of gymnastics in order to fit into this vision of a politician. I could just run for the families of my district and be great with it. And that's how we've been running this campaign.
And just to add on what Julie and Candace have been saying, I mean, there's this conventional wisdom that to win a red to blue district in Texas, you have to be very much to the right wing of the Democratic Party. And I think what we're trying to prove this time is that's not true, that when you run on a bold agenda, you can build this broad coalition. And to build on something that Congressman Raskin said, I mean, this closing couple of weeks, or really 12 days at this point in Texas, I mean, we already have record turnout. I mean, in my district alone, there's been over 200,000 votes, which is basically 2/3 of the entire electorate in 2018. It's amazing, but these last votes that we need to get out, a lot of them are young people, and they are going to be inspired by the progressive agenda, by the bold agenda. And so we have to keep running that way to finish the job here these last 12 days. And I'm excited to see what happens. But, you know, if all of us win in Texas, you know, it's going to change the whole country. So I'm very optimistic right now.
We're going to pick up some other wins too. You know, we got Nebraska, we've got Florida, we got Michigan. That Texas crew though, y'all are just crushing it. I'll just say for me, if we live in a world where so many of the conservatives and Republicans live in a fact-free campaign world, well, they'll just say whatever they want or make up a lie. We might as well then run on the things we actually believe in, because then we get to stand in our truth. And the truth is always going to be more powerful than their lies.
Absolutely. I think the thing that people are seeing in this district is that in 2018, when we really ran a candidate specifically to appeal to the middle, it left the Democrats behind. And so they lost the middle and the left. And then it just greatly underperformed. What we're seeing here is that when you really energize the left, the middle sort of comes to you because they see energy and excitement, and they come to you. So you kind of actually draw them by positive energy, then pandering to them, and then losing your true self.
Anybody else? Cara, Dana, others?
I would love to give a shout out to my colleagues who are running for the second time. This is the long haul, and I have a friend who from California who actually sent me and my husband and daughter dinner last night. I hope you have friends like that too, because we've been doing this a long time together, and I'm really grateful for all of your energy, because we got to do this. We just we have to win.
Yeah, I'm with Cara on the second time out, and it definitely takes a lot. But to me, what is one of the great benefits of having people like Congresswoman Porter and Senator Warren sort of paving the way is not only, what everybody else has said is true. It gives us, a model to follow, and it shows it can be done. But what I think is so valuable is that it proves to the doubters that this is a legitimate effort to invest in. It shows people who are skeptical that you can run on a bold progressive platform in a red district, that not only can it be done, but it can be done spectacularly, and it can produce the kind of results that we all desperately want. And when they have created the space in the political world and the political establishment for candidates like us to follow behind and do that and add to the strength and the power of the coalition pushing this agenda and fighting for these ideals, that I think is a tremendous service, not only to us as candidates, but to the advancement of progressive policy for the entire country.
Thank you so much, Dana. And I totally agree with you. It's been so inspiring seeing you and Cara and Mike, folks who have ran last cycle, who came so close to do it again. It's a big mental toll. It's a toll on your family. But it's been really kind of fun seeing people in the establishment, frankly, who were skeptical last time, who are now like, oh, they could actually do it. I guess we should be there. And again, in this crazy environment, when we know our members are being hit from so many different directions, we're happy to join with you to do our part. We're going to wrap up in a second. Is there anybody who hasn't spoken in a while who wants to get a last thought in?
Julie Oliver is a second-time candidate too, Adam.
Okay, sorry about that. Hi, Julie. Julie,
I will say that this second time feels so different than the first time. When I joke around with people, my very first block walk when I was running in 2018, or it was at the end of 2017, I literally went door to door. I did not do it in a targeted fashion. So you learn a lot for that first cycle, and hopefully don't repeat some of those errors. But I literally was not go to the next door, knock.
And Pam actually too, right? Yeah,
I ran in 2018, and I benefited, like some of my colleagues, from having sort of sweat equity in the bank with people face to face when COVID hit. I could move to virtual because so many people had seen me in person, and I wasn't starting from scratch.
Wonderful. Well, we know you have a lot of campaigning to do. We're going to wrap up in a second. Before we do, our finance director, Rachel, is going to make a cameo and make one final announcement. Rachel?
Hi, folks. Thank you so much. So very exciting. So we've raised over $102,000 for these amazing progressive candidates you all see here in just 1 week from over 1,300 grassroots supporters. So all of our thanks, we're so grateful. Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna keep that going. We're gonna report out thoroughly on this Zoom call. I think it's over 1,300 for each candidate in terms of grassroots donations in the last week. And about 20,000 came in the last 24 hours. This has been a really great event, great conversation, and hopefully something that we all remember when you're all serving in Congress in the near future. Thank you, everybody. redtobold.com.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate you.
Talk to y'all soon.
Thanks so much.
Hi, everybody.
Bye.